On August 6, 1945, a grudge was settled between the United States and Japan. For years after Hitler's suicide and the end of conflict in Europe, Japan would still refuse to surrender to the Allies, deeming it the most dishonourable act possible, a fate worse than death. And so they fought, and they fought some more, vowing never to submit, never to surrender, in what we now call the Pacific War. Having hit the US with the bombing of Pearl Harbor in 1941, tensions had risen to their climax. Something drastic had to be done, either by the West or the East. The Americans, as it turned out, struck first. What you're now watching is footage of one of the only 2 atomic bombs ever put to use in history. Nicknamed Little Boy for its small size, the bomb contained 13 kilotons of uranium, flattening the entire city of Hiroshima and producing 70,000 deaths in an instant. To those on the ground, it was like the sun had risen for the second time that day, and the final time of many of their lives. Only days after, following Japan's continued refusal to surrender, the Americans struck again, this time on the city of Nagasaki, in total killing 250,000 people at the flick of a switch. With the rising heat of the mushroom clouds, a new dawn came for man, a cold, scorching sunrise. We had become gods, with the power to level cities in the blink of an eye. The only question on everyone's mind now was, what comes next? I'm going to show you one man's reaction to it all on the day of Little Boy's detonation. The man that built the bomb himself.
Few people laughed. Few people cried. Most people were silent. I remembered the line from the Hindu scripture, the Bhagavad Gita. Vishnu is trying to persuade the prince that he should do his duty, and to impress him takes on his multi-armed form and says, "Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds." I suppose we all thought that, one way or another.
The man speaking in this video is Robert Oppenheimer. There's something so delicate about the way he chooses his words. This video is... it's fucking terrifying, man. Born to a Jewish family in New York in 1904, Julius Oppenheimer was always said to be an achingly curious soul. Quiet, peaceful, lost in his own little world. He's a bright boy, always dreaming, always yearning to learn more. It was because of this idleness, which during the Great War was seen as being a coward, that Robert's father would send him out to Los Alamos on a horse with a jar of peanut butter and a bottle of whiskey. You see, his father had fled Jewish persecution in Europe in the late 1800s, and didn't really appreciate his son being so comfortable and free to think. Feminine, as he put it. He wanted to teach him to toughen up, and so young Robert would spend weeks out alone on his horse, eventually becoming enamoured with riding and spending large chunks of his life out in the desert. But he wouldn't give up his love for physics. It was upon entering university in 1922 that he would stun his professors with his scientific prowess, doing work on black holes, quantum physics, and most of all, radiation. This last one interested Oppenheimer the most, and he became in fact quite obsessed with it. It the only subject that would entice him to work hard. Otherwise, he was seen as an unkempt, lazy student, always looking dirty, and smoking large amounts of tobacco certainly didn't help. It wasn't until he won a scholarship in Cambridge, where he'd attend lectures by Ernest Rutherford and Max Planck, that he'd become fully invested in theoretical physics, obsessively spending days on end tirelessly slaving over it. He was going to stop at nothing to leave his mark on the world. It was his burden. Back in America, he grew depressed as he would give long lectures on the subject to a diminishing number of students after graduation, in spite of his crippling social anxiety. The eve of the fiery Second World War was no help to this either, as he would look on in horror at what was going across the Atlantic over in Europe. Being from a Jewish background, Oppenheimer grew sick with worry that the Nazis would invade America too, and thus the world would never be able to marvel at his achievements. It was then understandably to his joy when one day in 1942, world-famous physicist Albert Einstein knocked on his door to discuss matters of war. Having already met in Europe, the two had built up quite a history together. But this meeting was to change his life, and those of thousands. Over tea and cigarettes, the German scientist started talking to him about nuclear physics, in particular fission, Oppenheimer's specialty. Einstein then mentioned what he was there to talk about all along, a government plan under the name of Project Manhattan. It was known that the core of an atom contained shit tons of energy that could be unleashed only if done in a certain way, not only by the Americans, but the rest of the world too, including Germany. The biggest fear for the US was therefore that the Germans had been using this knowledge to build a weapon of apocalyptic proportions, preparing to use it on the Allies. Einstein was simply there to ask Robert to build it before they would. Oppenheimer agreed, turning his natural hatred for the Nazis into a newfound motivation, an intense drive to get his work done and help the world once and for all. So they set up a base in Oppenheimer's place of dreams, Los Alamos, renovating an abandoned high school into a nuclear testing facility, even naming it after his old horse, Trinity. But the work was long and hard. For months and months, hundreds of men slaved over the bomb's construction, testing hundreds of different variations on the basic design for the nuke, until finally, in 1945, the little boy was completed. The thing was slim, deceivingly small, seeing as it contained 64 kilograms of pure uranium. Things were looking good, to be honest, until a small problem arose. The Nazis had been defeated. Having committed suicide in 1945, the death of Hitler meant that all conflict in Europe had ended, getting rid of Oppenheimer's targets, effectively meaning his work had been for nothing. This wasn't all. Even though they had used the bomb, doubts were springing up as to whether the energy released by the core's fission, or rupture, would set the entire Earth's atmosphere alight. Hope was seemingly lost, as Oppenheimer fell into yet another one of his many brief depressions. But the Pacific War carried on, and time was ticking. Despite having been designed for the Nazis, the US military was considering using the bomb against the Japanese now to put an end to everything, to which Oppenheimer objected greatly. Firstly, because he had no qualm with the Japanese, and secondly, saying he thought the humanitarian costs would be too great, given that they wanted to hit cities filled with innocent civilians. But his opinion didn't really seem to matter anymore, as he had done what he'd been asked to do, build the bomb. He was told that if he did anything to stop them, he'd be seen as an enemy to the state, and most likely executed as a war criminal. Oppenheimer was fucked. And so the bombs were flown out on a jet called the Enola Gay, and well, we all know what happened next. What's funny is, Oppenheimer was probably one of the first ever scientists to ever witness the immediate consequences of their work with their own eyes, and their effect on the world. He was understandably devastated, destroyed. They say the first thing those bombs annihilated wasn't the cities or the people. It was the man's soul. Words can't even describe the void he must have had punched through his body upon seeing the deaths. The burning, the rubble, the ruins, the horror, the sheer horror of it all. Have your life's work result in the nullification of an entire metropolis. A whole world of men, women, children, families, lives on end, stories little and grand, personal and intimate, traditions, beliefs, history, music, culture, joys, sorrows, ambitions, dreams, love, hatred, heroes, villains, all that reality and all that life, all gone in the burning blink of a blinded eye, all because of you, because you wanted to fly close to the sun and taste its light. There was no coming back from it. You'd become a god of death, he himself said it, and there was no respite. No amount of politics can save your mind from the horror. Robert died alongside those hundreds of thousands of harmless innocents. Oppenheimer was all that remained. He led the remainder of his days, a pale husk of his former self. Advocating for the ban of all nuclear weapons and all wars to come, he obsessed over redemption for his crime against humanity. During the Cold War of the 50s through to the late 80s, the world hung on every word in fear of more nukes being flung. But not a single one ever was. To this day, the only nuclear bombs ever put to use remain Little Boy and Fat Man. Most believe that, in a way, the very scenes of hell shown by the Hiroshima and Nagasaki blasts were enough to dispel man from ever committing such an act again. As for Oppenheimer, he passed away in 1967 from lung cancer, most likely brought on by his copious smoking habit. As for me, I don't think he was a monster. I think that, like the myth of Icarus, Robert just wanted to fly too close to the sun, like any man would. Nothing could bring those hundreds of thousands of lives back, and we should all take that as a warning, forever and ever, till the end of time. As for Robert Oppenheimer, we should let the man rest in our minds and memories. He deserves peace. We all do, man. We fucking all do.
Of our new knowledge.
Science has profoundly altered the conditions of man's life, both materially and in ways of the spirit as well. It has extended the range of questions in which man has a choice. It has extended man's freedom to make significant decisions. No one can predict what vast new continents of knowledge the future of science will discover. But we know that as long as men are free to ask what they will, free to say what they think, free to think what they must, science will never regress, and freedom itself will never be wholly lost.